Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 2, Episode 2. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
And this episode is sponsored by the Poirier Group. On this episode, we have a feature interview with Ron Thurston, best-selling author of Retail Pride, Vice President of Stores at Intermix. Steve, I think it's well known that you're a fan of physical stores, but is it fair to say, from all our conversations and from everything you write and have been thinking about, that increasingly making that distinction at a strategic level is actually missing the point?
Well, it's not so much that I'm a fan of physical stores. I think that they get a bad rap as if somehow all physical retail is going away. But as to the point about the distinction, I think increasingly the reality is that it's all just commerce. And if you've got a good, powerful brand that happens to have physical stores, it's really about making that all work well together. So you have to have great e-commerce potential, you have to have great physical store presence, and you've got to make it all work together.
Well, Ron's been doing yeoman-like work, I would say. I mean, he's really present, and the book is a fabulous testimony to both his career, a career in retail, and the role of people in the role of people in stores. So let's bring him on. Let's have a listen.
Well, I'm happy to welcome our guest for today, Ron Thurston, who's written an incredible book, probably one of my favorite books in quite a few years, called Retail Pride. So welcome to the podcast, Ron.
Thank you so much, Steve and Michael.
Well, before we get into your book, Ron, we usually like to have our guests just tell us a little bit about themselves, both their personal and professional journey. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the man that is Ron Thurston.
Sure, I'd love to. So I am from California, and I say that because it kind of started the journey of my love of retail. I went to school at Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, FIDM, on the West Coast. And I'm from Lake Tahoe and then Sacramento. And so finding kind of a fashion retail school for me was really important. I knew that I wanted to be in this industry somehow, whether I was going to be a retail leader, a buyer, a designer, something. I didn't know what it was, but all I knew was this was an industry that I loved as a young person and was ready to jump in. And so I studied retail administration at FIDM for a couple of years. Then I got a degree in fashion design and was student body president and just had the most joyous time, and worked part-time retail during my education, and originally thought I was actually going to be a fashion designer and had some success. I worked as a pattern maker, a design room manager, a designer for a couple of brands. And it was fine. And I think as a 20-something, approaching 30, I was like, this feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, until I accidentally kind of stumbled into the Broadway, which was part of Macy's management training program. And I said, I'm just going to try this, see if I like it. I like the idea of being around clothes, and this feels like it's something I could do. And immediately fell in love and said, this is what I had hoped kind of working in this industry felt like. I had influence on product. I was leading a large team. I could learn how to really create really incredible customer experiences and just build this momentum around an industry that I had already fallen in love with. And from there, I spent 10 years at Gap in a variety of different roles and continued to grow my career from sales to leadership roles, multi-store leadership roles. I worked in corporate visual merchandising for Gap brand. I worked in outlet for a while, and then have since, just in the last 2 decades, had such a pleasure of working for really great brands who were having important moments in their time. I helped early team help launch West Elm, which was done by many former Gap people like myself. Helped launch Tory Burch, kind of early years, also many Gap people at Tory. I ran Apple stores for a while. That was really about early Apple retail and everything that has come with that, with the growth of specifically of the iPhone. And then several years ago, moved here to New York to help launch Bonobos and their unique retail business model, and ran Saint Laurent for both North and South America. And then today I'm the vice president of stores at Intermix, which is also owned by Gap again. So it's been interwoven in my career throughout, and it's been a pleasure to always be in the retail space.
Well, one of the things, there are a lot of things I love about your book, but I think what you do is you bring so much of this diversity of experience to bear in the storytelling. But maybe just stepping back, could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write Retail Pride in the first place?
So when I thought about kind of this experience, you think about your legacy, you think about all the hard work that goes into a retail leadership career and its evolution. And what I discovered through, all those brands I just mentioned over the span of 20 years, and I've probably opened, a couple of hundred stores. I've hired thousands of people. I've visited hundreds of stores, both as a training in visual merchandising, as a multi-store leader, as a vice president. There's a very common theme of feeling kind of underrepresented, under-celebrated, not really understanding the hard work that goes into working in retail, the long days, long nights, crazy weekends, crazy customers. Of course, you always have that. All kinds. There's just so many stories. Often the first question, I ask in interviews is, how did you end up in retail? And it's very common that it was never their intention. I actually felt like I'm often an anomaly of I really wanted to be in this business. And for many people, that wasn't always the case. Yeah. And so as I thought about it more, I'm like, there really needs to be more of a conversation about the joy of retail, both from, the operational business side, like you write about, Steve, and also from the kind of people, all of the millions of people that work in this industry who don't always have the voice of how much they love it. And that's what I really wanted to celebrate. Pride was a very specific word I wanted to use. And I think the word itself can be controversial. I wanted to say, we're really proud to work in retail. And many, many people do. I see it on LinkedIn every day, pictures of store teams. I see so much celebration. And I wanted to just bring more attention to the industry. And I feel like I've done that with this book.
Let's, and I love the book. I love the taking of that media and making it your own, because I think you fill the white space on the shelves. I always ask authors about, when they write a book, what was missing? In other words, why do they think they, that the world needed another book about X? And I think you filled a nice white space. Let's transition a little bit into the world we're in today. And I don't want to dwell on it, but it is obviously the case that retail today looks and feels a bit different at this moment in time, but also potentially over the long run. When you think about the principles of good retailing that stay static, right? That a great relationship is a great relationship. What do you think is the same? And in your mind, what are you experiencing that is now or could be different against that kind of touchstone of these things are fundamental principles? Do you think that there's some change in the fundamental principles?
When I think about great retail, the first thing you think about is often the store design, because you experience the store and how it feels and how it smells and what you hear. But more importantly, you remember the people that work in it. And when I think about the fundamentals of great retail, I'll share an example. When I was running retail for Saint Laurent several years ago, when Eddie Slimane was the creative director, when you think about the history of a brand like Saint Laurent, and Yves Saint Laurent opened the first he was the first couture designer to open a ready-to-wear boutique, and he did it, I think, 1966 on the left bank of Paris. And when I imagine that space, I imagine him being there. A lot of photographs of him in the space, hiring people who were exceptional at service, building relationships, talking about his brand, gathering feedback from his customers, this kind of brand building, storytelling, people-centric, service-centric business. And, I really kind of immerse myself in that idea. Even my office, I had it decorated in furniture from 1966 because I wanted to understand how did he feel in that moment as he opened a brand under his own name. What was retail to him? And like that's real. When I think about the fundamentals of retail, that's what it is. And while today it has to be much more channelless and integrated with some technology, and inventory becomes channelless, all of it, the fundamentals to your question, Michael, are the same. Anyone wants to have that experience where you've immersed yourself in a brand and you've learned something about it and you've shared your feedback and it becomes so memorable. It's so important as we think about the future that none of that, in my opinion, is really going to be different.
One of the things you get into, which I think is related to the question, are what you call the 3 pillars of retail expertise. Could you talk about what those 3 are and why you think they're important?
Yeah, and of course, these are entirely my own opinion, but I think when you think about the fundamentals of, regardless of the role that you play in the store, from stock, back of house, sales, leadership, corporate leadership that involves stores, there were really 3 buckets that I could apply everything to. So they were empathy being the first, curiosity being the second, and focus being the third. Empathy is a word that we all have used a lot in the last year, but it has never become more important, in my opinion, that we are empathetic to, first and foremost, our teams, because everyone's gone through a lot, and to make sure that we are listening and we are accommodating as we need to. We're providing resources where we should. And also at the same time with our customers, that we're highly empathetic. We again, listening. We are potentially changing our inventory strategy, our product design flow. All of it now is really based in empathy and learning how we're all navigating the world. And with that comes a sense of curiosity. So I challenge anyone that works in retail leadership. Your success and your ability to build your network is so immersed in curiosity. And how do you continue to ask great questions, to think about the future of the industry and the businesses that will be important, and the idea of always asking great questions and acting and learning and changing your strategy based on that curiosity. Focus is a word that I think anyone that works in stores understands, because there's a million things coming at you every day. It's phone calls and it's shipment and it's customers and it's a window directive. And, every day you have a plan and every day it changes and every day it's new. And we love that about it, but it requires a skill to be able to focus and say, this is what we're going to be good at today. We're going to throw everything out of the window. I talk in the book about Saturday being our favorite day. We're not going to do anything today except make incredible impressions on our customer. That's the ability to focus and minimize the noise to stores, which is so prevalent, and actually focus your effort to accomplish what you want to get done. So I keep those filters of, are you highly empathetic and curious and focused? If you do those things well, I think it can really lead to great retail success.
We'll be right back. This episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast is sponsored by the Poirier Group. Do you want to move faster, streamline your processes, and have larger margins? If you're a retailer in 2021, chances are you do. The Poirier Group's award-winning team of industrial engineers and performance improvement experts specialize in driving results for retailers and grocers across North America. From reducing call center wait times to improving stocking and replenishment processes in warehouses to seamlessly integrating IT systems and more, they are your trusted partners you need. TPG doesn't just design solutions, they leverage years of actual industry experience to implement them and set you up for long-term sustainable success. Just ask their clients. Over 15 years of business, 100% positive review. Visit thepoiriergroup.com/remarkable to learn more today.
With so much technology being applied these days and more customer journeys being digitally driven and so forth, I'm not even so much, though I'm curious what you found have been successful during the COVID times, but how do you think differently about these three pillars of retail expertise when perhaps you're not as much in a face-to-face customer service world or a high-touch customer service world as you might have been in the past?
Yeah. So when I think about one of the technologies that I've really embraced this year in my business is chat through the website. So Intermix has very much been known for kind of this in-store, we're your personal style editor. We're showing you what the best of every brand that we carry is, the best edit, really great styling. All of it happened in the stores. Our most loyal clients were always store clients. And so we said, all right, if you're not going to come in, let's try to recreate that, at least the option to experience it via chat or phone calls or FaceTime or something. So when I think about empathy, on the other side of the chat, you have someone who really wants to visit a store, wants to know how something fit. What do I wear this with? All of those questions that you would get in a store, feeling kind of empathetic and say, I really understand what you're struggling with. Let me try to help you with that via chat instead. And that you're really curious and you're asking same, like you can ask great questions in a chat function. It also requires you to then be incredibly focused and say, I have a customer that I'm currently chatting with. I have customers walking in the front door. The phone's also ringing. Where are my priorities? And so I actually apply the same principles to kind of a tech-enabled experience and an in-person experience. You just have to think about them in a new, unique way.
Let me turn that lens around a little bit. So we're hearing and seeing, we've seen it from China, we're seeing it here, the role that social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or live streaming, plays in the consumer's life of understanding your store and your assortment. Because now at this point in time, they don't really want to linger in the store as much as they might ordinarily, but this too shall pass. But as you've been experiencing thinking about it, how do you think this is going to change the role of the store and associate when consumers are coming in, I'd say less curious and more refined in what they're looking for? Like, walk me through how you're thinking about getting your people ready for that, and if you think that'll be one of these changes that just sticks over the long run.
Yeah, it's exactly what we saw early on. So when stores opened back up, and I would say lucky / very intentional about getting every store back open in the country. The customer was much more specific about what she was looking for. I need new denim. I need tops for Zoom meetings. I need these particular things. And that very much was a pivot for us. But what I've started to hear and see and feel more is that they're ready to get back in and have that experience of the season and trend and feeling beautiful and actually kind of craving that again. I think that we've all learned how to shop digitally, but we all, I think, miss the human connection that we've not had.
And Steve, you framed this in the context of this bifurcation in some ways between efficiency and experience. And it's hard to out efficient the Amazon models of the world, or even the Stitch Fix models of the world that's delivering product right to your doorstep, right? It's hard to be more efficient. I guess that's that bigger role, Ron, with your people around being inspirational.
It's inspiration, it's joy, it's a level of engagement with strangers in some way, having these conversations that you took for granted not that long ago. And to say, I want you to leave the store feeling better than you did when you walked in. You may buy something and you may not, and that's okay. But I want you to experience the brand and me in its best possible form. And when you're ready to shop, you're going to come back and see us again. And that's the pure joy of retail. Yeah. And so, yes, I'll have to take all that into account. And we are seeing I'm personally lower conversion rates because it's like they just need someone to talk to. And I'm like, if that's what we are, then I will take that until she comes back and spends money. So all of it is just a new the human touch in our business is the core of why we're here.
Well, and it's certainly one of the reasons why I think this idea that physical retail is going away has just been really silly. And I know you touch on that in your book. I was talking to somebody the other day, and when I was rereading your book and prep for this, I was thinking you do such a great job of tapping into, and you've used this word a couple of times now, the joy of shopping, the fun of shopping, the connectedness. I think that people are craving that. And I think even in the environment where higher end retailers like Intermix and others have found ways to use live streaming and chat like you talked about, it's still just not, and nothing against Intermix in particular or anybody, but it's just, it's just not that fun because you can't fully experience what a great retail environment and a great sales associate experience can offer. And so I do think that people are craving that people will really be reminded of it when they can go back to more of what's normal. But one question I do have for you quickly is, given that you have been kind of forced and other retailers have been quote unquote forced to experiment with things like chat and live streaming and just other ways to serve customers outside of kind of the traditional high touch retail environment, do you think much of that will persist now that customers have experienced it? Or how do you think that will change perhaps the way you operate in the post-COVID times?
I think it will continue to merge and evolve in really organic, natural ways. So I think, and I can speak for myself, we had a large bucket of store-only clients who were not interested in omni, who then said, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to wait for my stylist. I'm waiting for the store to reopen. I'll wait for them. And a whole other camp of web only. And there were always crossover in the middle. What I've seen is some, not all, of those store-only clients have merged into the middle. Some of those web-only clients have said, I actually really would like to go to a store. Where's the nearest one to me? And so it has become quite fluid in a kind of natural, organic way that is really powerful. Those are the most valuable clients if they're shopping every channel, including social. So I think we have to keep thinking about it as channelists, celebrate the client. If maybe they're in the store, I referenced Bonobos. You're in the store, your only intention in the guide shop is to have an experience. You're not buying anything. And I always love that about it. I'm like, you can go home and order all you want. That's fine. But you're going to leave here knowing what size chinos you should wear. Yeah. And I think that there's such value in that level of experience that you are creating in the store environment, and how they choose to actually purchase from your brand. I think you have to leave that up to the client.
Well, maybe we can finish up the way you do in the book. You talked earlier, and I guess we didn't reference this, but the subtitle of the book is, so it's Retail Pride, the Guide to Celebrating Your Accidental Career. And you've shared about how you and others have and myself included, Michael included, didn't necessarily start or didn't grow up wanting to necessarily be in retail, but here we are all these years later. But since we do have a lot of folks, we know we have students, we know we have people earlier in their career that are listening to the podcast. What kind of intentional career advice would you give to people to take as they think about what they're doing today and maybe where they want to go in the future in retail?
So the thing that I didn't do very well early on that I would give that advice today is work very intentionally on your network. And what I mean by that is, you've got a really active LinkedIn community that you can use to build your network, but don't just work on it passively. Reach out to people that you think are interesting, message them, connect with them, engage with their content, really work hard on building a network of people in different parts of the industry, the next kind of 3-level jobs from the one you have today. And I think you'd be really surprised what you'll learn and how you engage. I think all of the webinars and podcasts and everything, the content that's out today, don't just listen to it passively. Same thing. When I really thought about the book, and Steve, I'm sure you did too, I wanted to tap into all kinds of different parts of our industry and say, this is not just about fashion. I might work in fashion, but let's not leave it at that place. So I would say work on your network, ask questions, get involved, do as much as you can. It's free. It's easy, make that happen. I would say, learning how to tell your own story about why you're in this business. Because there are a lot of retail like hiring managers as we go into this kind of rebuilding the infrastructure and getting stores back open again and in putting the wheels in motion here. We all have a story to tell about retail and our careers, and learn how to do that in a really articulate way. And I would say in a really kind of educated way about what's happening. Because there's a lot of really great things happening in our industry, great new businesses, things that are expanding, things that are growing. Don't get sucked into this idea of like the death of retail, to your point. Like there's a lot of great things happening. You may not always see it in the headline, but it's there. And I would just challenge everyone of like, find what's really working and get involved.
Well, Ron, you're a great ambassador for retail, leading the charge in all kinds of different ways, from destigmatizing the role to just being such a great advocate for the industry. So, listen, it's been a real treat to have you on the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Steve, and you and I drafting our season 2 list of people we wanted on the podcast. Ron was pretty close to the top, if not right at the tippy top. So, it's thrilled we were able to make it happen.
Well, I have to admit, it pains me to promote any other book besides my own. However, it's really a terrific book. And the other thing, well, I said a little bit earlier, it's got such an optimistic, upbeat, celebratory, joyful tone. It's really inspiring, I think, particularly in some bleak times. So I love that about it. It really comes from a place of not only celebrating the world of retail that we know, but I think so many great leadership principles for industries outside of retail. So I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Check it out. Ron, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll see you out in the world one of these days.
I hope so. Thanks very much, both of you. Really appreciate it.
All right, Steve. Well, that was a great guest, our first guest for the second season. What really resonates with me about Ron's work is the passion for people, his passion for people, and beyond the efficiency of e-commerce. We shouldn't lose the script, right? I mean, retail is about connecting with people in one way, shape, or another, right?
I think that's a big part. I know this has come up a bunch of times, which is, what is the customer trying to do? Sometimes you just want to get something off your to-do list and just get in and out of that store quickly and efficiently, and maybe you don't even really want to interact with anybody. Right. But certainly there are lots of times, and Ron's experience is really with that great in-person experience where the salesperson is connecting with the customer, adding value through advice, putting outfits together, whatever it might be. So I think depending on what it is you're trying to do as a retailer, what it is the customer is trying to do, that's an important distinction. But people make all the difference in high-end retail for sure, and in lots of other kinds of retail.
All right, Steve, time for Remarkable or Forgettable, our very popular segment. We've had great feedback on it so far. We're going to continue to have fun with it. Let's just jump right in. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the transition, the results. What do you think?
Oh, definite remarkable. First of all, as much as people want to criticize various things that Bezos has done over the years, and I think with some good reason, it's impossible not to really just recognize how much he's done and how amazing the company has become. Probably an obvious point. Then we got this guy, Andy Jassy, I think is his name, coming in. Great name. Yeah. There's a lot of conversation, which I think is sometimes misunderstood. I know we got into this with Jason Goldberg on an earlier episode in terms of what really drives Amazon's profits. But I think picking the AWS guy as the leader going forward is pretty interesting. And the results
seems like he knows how to make money, right?
Seems to. I don't personally know him, but certainly he's well respected and has done a great job. So that'll be interesting to watch. And then the earnings are just unbelievable. I mean, we've gone from this period where AWS was the big contributor to the retail business, the advertising business, just the subscription business, everything just firing on all cylinders, and certainly helped by the pandemic to a certain degree, but the momentum there is unbelievable.
To a certain degree, because when I look at the numbers of who gained the most, Amazon didn't gain the most during last year. Really, Target, Walmart, from a percentage perspective. Now they're bigger to begin with, but so they're there's other competitors who are gaining share. It's not all theirs to be had, but they've just got such a great starting point that a few points on their big online business is just massive. All right, so. That's remarkable. Victoria's Secret, talking about a spinoff. What do you think about that? It's not the first time, right? They bought a Canadian company called La Senza, and
Right.
spun that off to a private equity shop out of California. So what do you make of this?
Forgettable. Well, first of all, in general, I don't think that spin-offs automatically do much. I guess the argument is with a different owner, maybe with more scale or a different view, like we talked about LVMH with Tiffany. I think that's way more interesting. We don't know yet what this is going to look like, but Victoria's Secret's one of those brands that's been stuck in neutral, maybe in reverse at times for several years now. So I doubt this is going to change much.
All right, let's talk about department stores, but some sign of life. I was looking at Kohl's results, which were pretty good, and I wonder, is it for Kohl's? Is it cyanide, or is it the future when they do things like drive store traffic with returns and Amazon returns? What do you make of Kohl's, and then what do you make of department stores showing a bit of life?
So overall, I would say this is pretty forgettable. First, we should realize that with a lot of the department stores, some of this bouncing back is pent-up demand. Some of this is, particularly in the U.S., but other markets, I think, government stimulus. If you look at it, it's also
a bit of consumer behavior too, right? People they don't want to go to 10 shops to get their shopping done. They want to consolidate, right, to be safer, right? So that too shall hopefully pass, and people go back to specialty store shopping, maybe.
Well, a little bit, I think, of what's going on here is, certainly if you look at the department stores in aggregate, they've been losing market share for like 20 plus years. I don't see anything post-COVID that suggests suddenly department stores are going to come back into favor. So it's really a market share gain. And I do think Kohl's is a little bit better positioned than some to perhaps get a disproportionate share of that shrinking pie. But in aggregate, I don't see this middle market department store sector being any better post-COVID than it was pre-COVID. So some of the market share, yes, may consolidate around the better players. There are a lot of stores closing, so market share will consolidate to kind of the last man standing. But overall, to me, this is a little bit much ado about nothing.
Speaking about much ado, so returns in the news, as they kind of tend to are always first quarter, and there's some talk about returns and this news. 25% of them go to landfill or get destroyed. Behind the scenes, you and I know what goes on in returns, but what do you think of the buzz around returns, the focus, and what's your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure how to deem this remarkable or forgettable. I think the returns issue is getting much more attention in different respects. Some of this is the policies that some of the retailers are just telling you to keep it if you want to return it. Some of it is this landfill question, just this broader issue of sustainability. And so I think both the issue of the cost of returns as well as the particular ways some of them are handled is a huge issue, and it's going to get a lot more attention. So hard to call it remarkable or forgettable, but I think it's absolutely very newsworthy and something I hope we get to dive into in a future episode.
Yeah, that we should do a whole episode based on returns. We can stitch that together. Casper, Everlane, hiring, tapping into some executives, Walmart and Everlane, I think, bought some Nike executive. What's going on there? Is it remarkable, forgettable? Or they just, it's just a natural evolution? What's going on?
Too soon to tell, but I think what's really interesting about this is so many of these brands, particularly the bigger brands, relatively speaking, are really fighting to get to profitability or improve their profitability, whether they're looking to be sold or looking to IPO or whatever. And so we're seeing some of these founders leave and the so-called adults being brought into the room to I think, professionalize the management. So some of this, I think, is a natural evolution of the scale of these companies demanding different sort of talent. So whether this is really just what we might expect or whether this is investors going, hey, we really need to figure out how to make this thing work, and it's got to happen fast, probably a mix of both, depending on the particular brand we're talking about.
The return, and you've talked about the return of unit economics. But just as a hint to the listeners, we're going to have Emily Hayward, and one of the brands she helped create is Casper. So it'll be interesting to get her perspective, the founder versus the operator kind of discussion. All right, last one: DTC brands getting physical.
Well, we touched on this a little bit last episode. This idea that physical retail is still not dead. One of the most ironic things, of course, are these brands that initially raised money and talked about needing to avoid stores, actually getting very interested in stores. So that was going on pre-COVID. I think there was a sense that particularly with the big shift to e-commerce, that perhaps the physical strategies of some of these brands would slow down.
Yeah.
But in fact, well, I guess it's hard to tell in total, but in fact, we're seeing brands like Allbirds and others kind of doubling down on their physical store strategy. Yeah. So
despite COVID, right?
Despite COVID, and maybe partially anticipating, I mean, given the lead time of getting stores open, I think getting maybe cheaper rents and anticipating that by the time most of these stores open, they'll be hitting a rebound while maybe some other weaker players aren't able to invest. And so perhaps a market share grab.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, in general, watch whether there'll be a big shift to services, right? The restaurants and travel and that the volume comes out of goods is another corresponding thing or trend or phenomenon that we might see. I mean, it's too early to tell, but I have that vibe. People stop buying as much stuff and start going on vacation, pent up demand in a different way. All right. So that was our latest episode of Remarkable or Forgettable. And why don't you read us out? Take us through the final thoughts on the way out.
All right. Well, if you liked what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure and recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry or just about anybody else who's interested in what brands are doing. I'm Steve Dennis. You can learn more about me on stephenpdennis.com, and be sure to look for me on LinkedIn and Twitter for my latest insights.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast. You can learn more about me on ameleblanc.co or on LinkedIn. Steve, have a wonderful, safe week. Talk to you next week.
Look forward to it.